and players mobbing.
But Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
The Big Three NBA podcast is powered by PrizePicks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA podcast. I'm your host, Sherrod Blakely. I'm joined by Ethan Sands, Cavs beat writer for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. What's going on, Ethan? How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Sherrod? Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem. I enjoy this. We're going to be spending time throughout the offseason between now and when things kick off with training camp, just talking to different folks throughout the NBA ecosystem. And we're going to probably spend a little bit more time talking about teams in the East who are supposed to make a little bit of noise this year. Teams like, I don't know, the Cleveland Cavaliers, maybe. They're obviously coming off a really, really strong season. Didn't have the kind of postseason they were hoping to. Injuries certainly played a role in that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But when you look at where things ended for the Cavs last year, and you look at kind of where they are, and we're still in the summer offseason period. We're still there. But when you look at what they ideally wanted to do this offseason, where do you see them right now as we kind of inch closer and closer towards the start of training camp?
I still think that they made every move that they were supposed to in the offseason. It might not have been splashy, but the signs of a team that understands who it is and what they needed were exactly what this Cavs team did this offseason. Obviously, losing Isaac Okoro hurts defensively, and Ty Jerome was a stabilizing force when healthy, but Lonzo Ball's addition does more than patch those holes. It enhances the entire structure. He's a connector who raises the floor and the ceiling of your offense. He doesn't just dominate the ball, or he doesn't dominate the ball at all if you don't need him to, but he speeds it up. He doesn't need plays run for him, but he moves with purpose and brings order to chaos. I think this is a team that is again going to try and fight for that number one seed in the Eastern Conference. They realize how important that is, how helpful that can be in their playoff runs. And I know there's a lot of teams trying to make moves, and they have this target on their back from being the number one overall seed in the Eastern Conference from last year. And it's just going to be a dogfight in the Eastern Conference. As we know, it's more wide open than it's been in a long time.
Absolutely. And you know, when you start looking at teams throughout the Eastern Conference, it really does feel as though teams are preparing for this arms race where your success may not necessarily be because you're the better team, but maybe because you just have to be the healthier team or the deeper team or the team that has more counters. And I'm glad you brought up Lonzo Ball, because I think that's one of those subtle but very impactful potential moves that could be the difference between, you know, getting bounced in the first round or getting all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals or even the NBA Finals. Speak to what you anticipate Lonzo's going to bring to the table, because as we know, Garland's help was a factor in the playoffs, and certainly when you look at the contributing factors to Cleveland not being able to finish off being that top seed, his help was one of them. And it seems that Lonzo is a direct means of addressing that.
I mean, 100%. And obviously, when you come into this 2025-2026 season, we know Darius Garland is more than likely going to start on the injury list. He had surgery on that toe that was bothering him since game 2 of the Eastern Conference first round against the Miami Heat. So Lonzo Ball is going to have to come in and play a major role from the get-go. Right. And I think that's part of what the expectation was when the Cavs went and got Lonzo. He fits Kenny Atkinson's system like a glove. Pace, movement, quick decisions. That's what allowed the Cavs to lead the league in offensive efficiency last season. And Ball elevates that further, which is a little bit scary when you talk about how the Cavs were able to operate last season. Now you're getting players that fit more into the system that Kenny Atkinson wants to run. Plus, Lonzo is a grade defender when it comes to the opposite end of the ball. He's a guy that the Cavs have needed when you talk to about not only having a small backcourt in Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Now you throw Lonzo Ball, who's 6'6", but also he can defend. Also, he can arguably guard some of the best perimeter players in the league when he's healthy. And if need be, because of the lineup construction that the Cavs have done in the past, they could use him as a small forward and still give him ball handling opportunities to get Donovan Mitchell off the ball and get him in space that he wants to be in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we go any further, just want to let folks who listen to this that you are listening to the Big Three NBA podcast. And when you get a chance, show some love to our good friends at PrizePicks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and get a $50 bonus after your first $5 lineup. And as a friendly reminder, you are listening to, again, the Big Three NBA podcast, which is part of the CLNS Media Network, which is where you'll find this content and other great past and present Celtics content. And so now, again, let's get back to the regularly scheduled program. Where we are having a conversation with Ethan Sands of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, talking about the Cavs and their offseason, which, again, there's still plenty of time left in the offseason. But certainly they've made some moves that clearly will bolster their chances of repeating as the top seed in the East and potentially getting past that Eastern Conference kind of logjam, if you will, and getting to the NBA Finals. But one of the keys for them in any type of discussion about their growth and their evolution, particularly in the playoffs, is Evan Mobley. I think I speak for like 99.9% of the folks who cover the NBA and say that he had a breakout season. Showed a lot of, I think, the proven body of work that many kind of put in the category of potential. He could be this, he could be that. And we saw a lot of that come to fruition this year. What's the next step for Evan Mobley as he continues to evolve into an all-star? And for the Cavs, I think eventually a perennial all-star type on the front court.
He's 24 years old, Sherrod. That's the most important factor in all of this, right? We talk about a guy who was a first-time All-Star. He had the second team All-NBA, Defensive Player of the Year. You talk about elite, you talk about a jump, and the Cavs still think there's more to go. Donovan Mitchell keeps saying that he hasn't even reached his floor yet. This is what Evan Mobley is supposed to be on an off year. Now we're talking about being in the MVP conversation. Now we're talking about being a perennial contender for Defensive Player of the Year. It's supposed to be Victor Wembanyama and Evan Mobley, right? That's who it's supposed to be in these conversations. And as you mentioned, an all-star every single year going now. But I think there's also a mental part to this. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell is a top 15 player in the NBA, but he knows that Evan Mobley has to be the guy, or at least play like he thinks he's the guy on the Cleveland Cavaliers, for them to get past the Eastern Conference semifinals, for them to get to the NBA Finals, for them to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Let me not get ahead of myself. But the thing about Evan Mobley is he has all the tools. He's 7 foot tall. He acts like a guard. He needs to dribble the ball up the floor more. Kenny Atkinson is going to do that this coming season. But the physicality, the demeanor, the toughness, the mentality of physicality is so important for Evan Mobley because of what he can bring and what the expectation is for him. There's so much that the Cavs are going to want from him. And I think they've been doing it behind the scenes, right? As much as Donovan Mitchell has been pushing him in these conversations, pushing him even in his own interviews during the season last year, talking in the background, Evan, speak up, talking in the background, Evan, say that you're an all-star, tell them who you are. That's in part because he knows that what comes with being a number one option, what comes with that is criticism, critique, and being able to make mistakes and fail is okay. It's part of the process. And I think over the last couple of years of Evan Mobley's career, he's had to realize that. I think he has had the physical tools all along. It's about the mental growth that he needs coming into this next season. And that's what's going to separate him between being a all-star and being a first-team All-NBA type of player.
Yeah, I think Donovan Mitchell recognizes that this is the point in his career where he's got to kind of go into big bro mode, where you've got to really kind of get his guys to believe in themselves on a much higher plane. Because when you look at the teams that have won titles in recent years, none of them are one-man shows. When the Celtics won a title, yeah, Jason Tatum may be the best player, but it was Jaylen Brown who was Finals MVP and Eastern Conference MVP. When you look at the Denver Nuggets and what they were able to do, you look at OKC, as great as SGA was, the Jalen kid was pretty good. Chet Holmgren had his moments where he was really good. You start going down the line, and there were so many guys, that you could make a legitimate case played a significantly vital role to them winning above and beyond their best player. And so I think Mobley, it's kind of like a game of tag, and he's it. If Cleveland, I think, is going to make that next step and be that team that so many believe they can be, and their record has shown that they can be during the regular season, he's probably going to have to be the guy to make that happen. Now, one of the things that, I've learned this being around the Celtics, I've learned this being around the Detroit Pistons previously. Whenever your season comes up short in a year where you kind of position yourself for greatness, there are lessons learned that you typically bring into the next season that give you maybe a little bit more of whatever it is that you were missing. You kind of figured it out, unfortunately, by trial and error and experience. What do you think are the biggest lessons that this Cavs team took away from last season when they had such a great regular season, but obviously didn't end the way they wanted it to?
I mean, first and foremost, it starts with Evan Mobley. They realize that he has the potential to be that guy. The Cavs can't just rely on Evan Mobley as a defensive anchor or complementary piece. They need him to initiate offense, bend defense, and dictate matchups. That means becoming a reliable offensive hub, not once in a while, but every night. The consistency needs to be there. They also learned, as we talked about, that winning 64 games and securing the best record in the East doesn't guarantee you anything in May. They also found out that the hard way that playoff basketball is about execution under duress. Max Strus's message during the Indiana series in the Eastern Conference semifinals, he texted his group and says, if you don't believe, don't show up. That's not motivational. That's a warning. That's his team has cracks in its confidence even after leading the East in wins. So we all know this. Basketball isn't about offensive fireworks. It's about resilience. The half court gets mucked up, the pace slows down, and if you can't generate multiple actions or survive pressure defense, you're done. So I just think there's a priority in versatility this offseason, adding Lonzo, as I mentioned earlier, and keeping Sam Merrill instead of Ty Jerome. That puts everyone on the floor being able to shoot under pressure, handle the ball, cut space, and defend. That's what Kenny Atkinson's offense needs, especially that's what they learned after this last season. And again, the last part of that is conditioning is another red flag. You cannot get run off the court, even if the Indiana Pacers are playing at a blitzing speed. It's not about scheme, it's about pride. And so I think the lesson was clear. The Cavs don't need to change who they are. They just need to fully embrace who they are. While their offense took a sizable leap last year, their defensive identity is something that they kept coming back to. Throughout the entire 2024-2025 season, they were like, oh yeah, we're a defense-first team. Well, in the playoffs, I think you got to show it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you look at the way that they went about their business, and it was really, certainly for them, and I think for a lot of people who are really starting to kind of believe in them because, it seemed that, and you saw this up close and personal, Ethan, it seemed that as the season progressed, there was a sense that any minute now, they're just going to collapse. They're not going to get it done. They're going to falter. They're going to do this and that. And it didn't happen in the regular season. And, lots of factors, as we've already talked about, contributed to them not being able to seal the deal, in the playoffs. But, when you look at the way that this team is kind of constructed, you look at the way they kind of carry themselves, you got to believe that, for them, a lot of this success is going to come back to just confidence, understanding the crucial moments of big games and being able to kind of fight through some of the adversity. And at the end of the day, complete the deal, get it done. They got the tools that are going to position them to be certainly in the top tier in the Eastern Conference. Even if it was a normal year in the East, you'd still look at them as a top 3 team. But because there's so much uncertainty and so much, I think, parity in the East, it's hard. I'm finding it hard pressed to believe that there's a team on paper right now that is better than them. And again, as you know, and I know, paper looks good. How you play is even better. That will really determine it, and they're going to be positioned to do that for sure. For those, and just again, for those who are listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Celtics All Access YouTube channel. where you can find our show and a lot of other great Celtics content out there. And also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so that you'll know the instant a new video drops like this one. And also, while we are showing love to the network, let's show love to our partners at PrizePicks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Don't miss your chance to cash in while your favorite athletes and teams are playing this summer, whether it's baseball, women's basketball, soccer, esports, you name it. PrizePicks has you covered, where you can mix and match player projections from all different types of sports. Again, combining your favorite players, and they're massive with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, which again is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. How do you get in? It is real simple, people. You simply download the app today, use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, you download the app today, use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first game. So after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And we're going to continue running along with the Cavs and just kind of looking at where they're going, and all that good stuff with our good friend Ethan Sands of the Cleveland Plain-Dealer. Ethan, we've talked a lot about what the Cavs have and who they're bringing in and what they're doing. But how do you see them, or where do you see them position-wise in the Eastern Conference? And who do you think are the biggest threats to them? Because they're coming in as, the team with the best record in the Eastern Conference. And obviously there are lots of teams that want that spot. Who do you think are the biggest threats to them at the top of the East going to the postseason?
Well, first and foremost, as you mentioned a little bit ago, I do think that the Cavs still should be viewed as the #1 team in the Eastern Conference, especially with Indiana dealing with Tyrese Halliburton going to be sidelined for the entirety of this next season, and Boston, not saying Jason Tatum's not going to come back, but he's coming back from an Achilles injury, and if he does come back, it's going to be in the playoffs, if that, late into the playoffs. So I do think that the Cavs are the #1 team to beat in the Eastern Conference, but I do think that there are teams that made acquisitions this past offseason that are going to make it difficult on the Cavs, right? And so this is funny you mentioned this on my own podcast, the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We went through the top 6-7 teams. So I'm just going to give you my top 3. I had Atlanta, I had Orlando, and I had the New York Knicks. And a lot of people are going to look at me crazy and be like, well, you have the New York Knicks too low on this list. The reality of it, it's not because the Knicks don't have the star power. It's not because the Knicks don't have the players to get it done. It's because of the style of play that Atlanta and Orlando play that are so crucial in slowing down what the Cavs do that's successful. You remember earlier into the 2024-2025 season, there was maybe one team that had beaten the Cleveland Cavaliers twice. It was the Atlanta Hawks. Before Jalen Johnson got injured, they were able to run the floor on the Cavs. They were able to get out in space. They had defenders with length and speed that were able to keep up with them. And it was surprising to the Cavs, who got off to a 15-0 start last year. The Orlando Magic, of course, are going to be a difficult team because they're known for their defense and they have the pedigree and the roster to do all of that. Plus, now you're telling me they add Desmond Bane, something that they needed, a shooter that can snipe from long range, and he plays defense, and he's tough, and he almost got into a fight with Donovan Mitchell last year. I just think there's so much that those two teams do that have already proven, not to mention that Orlando just 2 years ago took the Cavs to 7 games in the first round of the playoffs. So I do think that those are the two teams that pique my ear the most on who gives the Cavs the most challenge. But the New York Knicks are right up there, and a lot of different power rankings have the New York Knicks as the second or third best team in the NBA. So I definitely think there's conversations for all 3 of those teams to be the biggest threats to the Cleveland Cavaliers this coming season.
I'm glad you mentioned Atlanta, because I think Atlanta is one of those teams that folks are going to act like, wow, I didn't see where they came from. But then when you start looking at their roster construction and you see what they have done in terms of where they are now versus where they were a year ago, it's clear that they are taking a page from teams like Cleveland. from teams like Boston. In fact, hell, they went so far as to get the guy that was in Boston, Kristaps Porzingis, to give them that high-low action, to give them that stretch big. And it to me, Atlanta is the one team that I think will give Cleveland the toughest run for the money, simply because of the way that their roster is constructed, the fact that they've got a guy that is not only, in terms of his ability, a difference maker. He literally was a difference maker in a team winning a championship or not. Even though he did not play a ton in the playoffs during the Celtics title run, when he played in that Dallas series, it was game over, lights out. He was able to give them a super terrific game that was one of the keys to them getting over getting past that Dallas team and winning a championship. And the thing about Trae Young, we think about Trae Young as, this shot chucker, which he is. I mean, let's just keep it real. He does that. But we often forget about the fact that this dude is getting you 10, 11, 12 dimes a night. And now you add a 7-footer who can stretch the floor, who can knock down threes, who can score on the block, who can help defend interior, and you got a bunch of wing defenders who are just like a bunch of piranhas out there, the way they just got to snapping and just making your life miserable. They're going to be a tough out. To me, their health is going to be everything. If they can keep their core guys healthy, they're going to be very, very difficult to beat. And as you said, Orlando, I mean, they have not had a guy that shoots the ball as well as Desmond Bane since JJ Redick. And the thing about Desmond Bane, and I pointed this out to folks that, in the previous episodes, that a bad year for Desmond Bane is shooting like 38% from 3-point range. That's a bad year for him. And so when you got a guy like that and you're playing with Paolo, now all of a sudden you're probably going to get a few more good looks than you got in Memphis. And so they're definitely going to be, to me, that's the big three in the East: Atlanta, Orlando, and Cleveland. And New York, I think New York is going to be good. But the thing that when I look at Atlanta, I look at Cleveland, I look at Orlando, they each have what I would consider multiple dynamic players. Cleveland, to me, New York, the best shot that they have is getting the right matchup. Like, I think if they were to play, let's say, Atlanta, I think that's a good matchup for them. I don't think Cleveland is a good matchup for them, because when you look at Mobley and then you look at Cat has a tendency to kind of become kitty cat when the games get big. And Mobley, I think he showed that, he got a little more dog in him than I think people realize. And then you've got Donovan Mitchell, and then you've got Jalen Brunson. At worst, they neutralize each other. I would say Donovan is probably a little bit more dynamic. Donovan is not a lockdown defender, but he's a better defender than Jalen Brunson. Let's just get that out of the way. And so that's a matchup that I don't think is a good one for them. And again, I think matchups will be vital and health will be vital. But it's a good issue to have if you're Cleveland, because I mean those are teams that you can see your roster is constructed in a way where you've got a better than average chance of getting past those teams, for sure.
And Sherrod, I don't mean to cut you off, but people are going to look at you a little funny because they're like, "Oh, the Knicks are going to be not a good matchup with the Cavs." Well, the Knicks beat the Cavs a few postseasons ago and made them look silly, but that's not the same Cavs team, right? We're talking about a different, more vital, more built-up team, more physically ready. That was the first time that the Cavs core four played together in a postseason, right? With Donovan Mitchell there. Now you're talking about they've had the experience to play Boston, Indiana, Miami, who wasn't really a playoff team, but still we're going to throw them in there. I just think you have the expectation of they're going to play to a different standard against the Knicks, and they have the too big lineup to match up with Mitchell Robinson, Jarrett Allen, and Evan Mobley to go up against Karl Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson. I just think their matchups are too similar, rather than when you mentioned the Atlanta Hawks, sure, they could go with a double big lineup in Onyeka Okongwu and Kristaps Porzingis, but I don't know if either of those guys are handling Mitchell Robinson, right? I just think he's too big of a offensive rebound hub. And it's hard to predict how his health is going to be in the playoffs, especially after the last couple of years that he's had. But I think you're absolutely right. And we've talked about this already. It's not the talent. It's not the experience. It's the health that is going to get them, right? A couple of years ago, Indiana was getting clowned because they had an easy route to the Eastern Conference Finals because they had to play everybody that was hurt. Well, that was kind of the same situation, but they had the good charm on this side this time. And then they get past the Boston Celtics, all of these things that have to happen for them to get there. And then Tyrese Halliburton blows out his tire and it has to deal with all of that again. So I guess you have to look at it from multiple different angles, and not every situation is the same. People who try and look back a few years to get the same sentiment as a team that has grown since then, I think you're losing the beauty of the game and how teams change over time. Nobody's the same, and not every situation is going to happen 2 times over.
Right, especially when you have a team where you keep the core of that team together. And when they first came together, they were relatively young. I mean, I think, and go back to the Celtics. I mean, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they were making deep playoff runs early up, really throughout their entire career. But it's clear that there was a level of maturation that they needed to get to in order to go from being a team that can get to the playoffs and maybe do a few things, dunk on LeBron every now and then and whatever, to a team that could just, absolutely run through anyone and everyone in their way to winning a championship. There is a journey, there's a process with that for sure. And I think that they are definitely, Cleveland, they seem well on their way to doing that. And one of the guys that we touched on a little bit, and I wanted you to talk a little bit more about him before we head out of here, is Jarrett Allen. Just putting anyone and everyone in the broadcast world on notice. When that man retires, he's taking somebody's job. Just let y'all know that right now. Don't act like don't say I didn't know. He is going to do this TV damn thing before he's all done with in sports, because he's really good. As you probably do him. He's a hell of a, not just good coach, just really smart, funny, and intellectual guy. But he can also ball. He's a good baller. And I'm just curious, what's your take on just the impact that he has on this team, and specifically his ability to help Evan Mobley be a better player? Because I think that's the one guy, maybe more than anyone else on their roster, who benefits from having Jarrett Allen on the floor. Yeah,
I mean, Jarrett Allen, we saw it 2 years ago before he got injured in that series against the Orlando Magic. He was arguably the best, most impactful player for the Cleveland Cavaliers on the floor. And then you see him play against the Indiana Pacers in those first 4 games of that series. He was unstoppable. And then in the game 5 and 6, he disappeared. That can't happen, right? So I think there's a duality with Jarrett, right? You go back 2-3 years when he has the infamous quote after the Knicks series, "The lights are too bright," which he, as we know, he's going to give you a quote or two, and he gets clowned for that still to this day. But the fact of the matter is he can still have fun with it. And I think Jarrett Allen, his game, his screen ability, he's one of the best screeners in the NBA. He's one of the best big-on-big threats, especially if Evan Mobley does what I was talking about earlier, if he's bringing the ball up, if they're doing big-on-big screens, and now you have Jarrett Allen rolling to the basket and you have to decide whether to stay out on Evan Mobley or Evan Mobley's trying to drive past you, I think there is so much room for that group to go. And I think also the fact that you bring this up, they help each other out on the defensive end of the floor more than anything else. There's been times when Jarrett Allen has had to play by himself and Evan Mobley's been sidelined or sitting out or whatever. And Jarrett Allen's like caught looking around because he expects Evan Mobley to fly in and get a help side block or whatever it may be. So there's sometimes an over-reliance, but you see the trust in that. You see the help factor in what they do for one another that allows the defense to play so well. They're both the defensive anchors on the team, but Jarrett Allen is the crux of that defense because he is the one that's calling out everything. He's the main talker, and as much as they want that to grow, as much as they want him to talk more, Jarrett Allen has been probably one of the most stable pieces of this Cleveland Cavaliers team when it comes to lob threats, when it comes to the defensive end, all of these things, and he does it without asking for anything. There have been people on Max Strus last year. I wrote a story about Jarrett Allen and his unselfishness. Max Strus called Jarrett Allen probably one of the best human beings he's ever met. That doesn't happen in the NBA.
That man up for the Pope ship. There we go.
I'm saying. So I just think there's an understanding of what Jarrett Allen means to the Cleveland Cavaliers, not only on the floor, but off it. Like, he is the glue that holds them together because of how he operates, his unselfishness, his creation, and just his mindset. And sure, he gives you a good quote or two, but I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls a Timmy D and dunks off and doesn't come back for a while, because he loves the environment. He loves just the world and traveling. He was in Japan this summer and all that. So I don't know if he's going to end up on your TV screen after his career is all said and done, but he's going to be doing something. You just might not know about it.
Yeah, we may have to follow him on social media to keep up with his whereabouts when he's done playing, for sure. And you mentioned Max Strus, who is a former Celtic, and that's there's a part of Celtics Nation that's just like, oh man, we probably fumbled the bag with that one. But not to dwell on the past, we're going to talk about the present, and the present actually has a Cavalier player now playing with the Celtics, Georges Niang. What can you tell us about him, other than the fact that him and Jaylen Brown have had had a kerfuffle moment that I guess they're past now that they're teammates? But what else can you tell us about the type of player, type of person that the Celtics are getting? And he's from Massachusetts, I know that, but just again, being around him on a regular basis, what's this guy like?
Georges Niang is one of those players that fans fall in love with quickly, and not just because of the shooting. Wherever he's gone, Utah, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Niang has been beloved. Now, does he fit the Celtics' traditional mold of gritty, switch-heavy defenders? Not exactly, but that doesn't mean he won't matter. Niang brings locker room presence, vocal leadership, and just enough edge to keep teammates sharp. I mean, this is a guy that in the locker room he had only been in for 2 seasons. He was like, there was a telling sign that he was no longer there. The Cavs were beside themselves, some of them, when they found out that Georges Niang was being traded. I mean, he's also not going to win you a series, but he might win you a quarter, and sometimes that's all that it takes. He's a tone setter, and some of my favorite things about him, he loves to talk, he loves to compete, he spaces the floor with confidence, he hits threes you don't expect him to hit, and he frustrates defenders not only because he's hitting them in their face, but you can't sag off him, and he's going to talk to you after every single bucket. But Boston fans might look at his frame and assume he's a defensive liability. Maybe so. But you know what else he is? A winner. He plays with edge, holds teammates accountable, and hits shots that matter. And again, as you mentioned, don't discount the hometown angle. Niang grew he was just outside Boston, right? He's a Massachusetts guy. So he's going to pour everything he can into that Celtics jersey. Even if he's not a postseason rotation lock, he'll bring leadership and lift. And especially in a season where Jason Tatum's injury is going to sideline him for a good amount of time, that kind of glue that Niang can bring is going to matter a whole lot. He's one of the players that, even being in Cleveland for just a short amount of time, not only players, but fans have come up to me and been like, you know what trade I hated the most that we made this year? Georges Niang, because he was one of my favorite players. And I had to question myself. I was like, y'all seen him play in the playoffs.
Right.
Right. But hey, if you love him, if you loved, you loved. So I think Niang is one of those guys that Boston fans are going to hate to love and love to hate.
Yeah. The thing about him, when I watch him play, even in Cleveland and elsewhere, he makes me think about something Doc Rivers used to say all the time when he was in Boston. And that is, when you're constructing a team, you got to have at least 1 or 2 agitators, guys that just, they may not be your best player. They may not be, awesome at any particular skill. They just get under guys' skin. And his thing is, every team that's contending for a championship or wins a championship, you usually find 1 or 2 of those guys on your roster. And when I think about Niang, that's exactly what I think of. He's an agitator. I mean, I've gone back and watched, some of the games that he's played against the Celtics, and as he would get on my damn nerves as a player. I would seriously be ready to just pop him. And then I think about that from a competitive standpoint. You kind of want a guy like that in your bunker. You kind of want a guy like that, when you're going to battle and you're trying to win one game. To your point, he may not win you a game, but he could win you the quarter that you needed to win in order to win the game. And that could be the one game that gets you over the top and get you on to the next round of the playoffs. And even though someone else may get all the credit for what they did in the last 2 minutes of the game and how someone had an amazing 20-point, 15 rebound game, and he may have had 5-6 points, but he may have had 5 or 6 points to kick off a 17-0 run that led you to the win. He's that kind of guy. But with the Celtics and just the way they're kind of playing musical chairs with this roster, we don't know if he's going to stick around. But I think that he's a guy that, again, because of his track record of success, I mean, damn near every team he plays for wins at a high level. Whether he is playing big minutes or not, he may be that lucky charm that you need that you didn't realize you needed. He could be that guy. But certainly, the Celtics, as they try to get their financial house in order, they're trying to find that balance between let's get the money down, but let's get the talent relatively high enough to compete. And certainly, he is the guy that gives them a chance to compete going forward. Before we get out of here, for those of you listening to the show, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS Media and Celtics All Access YouTube channel, that's where you can find all our shows and a lot of other great Celtics content. And one more thing, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you will know the instant a new video like this one will drop. This is Sherrod Blakely for our good friend Ethan Sands of the Cleveland Plain Dealer. This is the Big Three NBA Podcast. We're out.